Look, a young woman heads into the canyons, alone. Everything is documented, her route, her coordinates, every checkpoint. Each night, a check-in over the radio, until one day, she simply stops responding. The search begins immediately. Her car is found, her gear too, but Amy herself, nowhere. On a cliff face, the kind you can't climb without ropes, sits her backpack. Pristine, almost new, no footprints, no sign of a climb or a fall, no scent for the dogs to follow, just a journal with an unfinished sentence and a single word scratched into the rock. Again. Now think about this. Why did every search dog refuse to go past a certain point? Why do her coordinates match other disappearances? And if this wasn't the first case in the area, why has there never been a single article about it? Chapter 1. The Route Line. Spring doesn't arrive in southern Utah all at once. First, the frost vanishes. Then, the wind begins to speak. In March of 1998, the wind around Escalante was unusually dry. Not hot, dry. The kind of dryness that cracks your skin by day 2 and leaves your lips peeling before noon. Locals had a name for it. Pre-bake. That strange in-between after winter, but before the full heat settles in. One old park ranger would later recall, "I remember that March wind. It didn't just strip the air dry. It carried something with it. Strange smells, odd sounds, the kind you shouldn't hear from that far away. Folks around here know, when the wind's like that, you don't head deep into the canyons." On March 22nd, Amy Wilson drove straight into that climate. 24 years old, a geology student from Salt Lake City, finishing the final field phase of her project on the chronomorphology of rock strata. She was alone. Her car, a gray 1985 Subaru Leon, unremarkable on the outside, but fine-tuned for the job. Reinforced suspension, a detachable water tank, an external radio loop bolted to the roof. In the glove box, a map with her own hand-marked coordinates. In the trunk, a military-grade case of geo-survey equipment, and a box labeled PT 0409 Field Only, property of Depth of Geosciences. Amy wasn't there for sightseeing, she was on assignment. The goal of her route was an area known as the Second Stone Arches, near Coyote Gulch Canyon, east of Escalante. Not the classic trails like Epoch Arch or the Heaven's Window. These second arches never appeared on tourist maps. They were mostly used by professionals. The formations are unstable, access is restricted, but the terrain is ideal for mapping sediment layers. In local legends, especially among the Paiute elders, these second or hidden arches were said to be places tied to wandering paths, or places where you could lose not only your way, but even your shadow. Amy chose the site herself. Her project supervisor gave her the freedom to select her own area. In a February letter, she wrote, "I want to try heading toward the second arches. Fewer distractions, fewer footprints. I can take measurements on clean, bare rock." She arrived at sunset. The last stretch of asphalt was 50 miles back. Beyond that, a dusty track cut by old riverbeds and half buried in scrub. She parked 200 yards from the west ridge. On the dashboard, an open map. On the back seat, a water canister and trekking poles. Outside, nothing left behind. No wrappers, no trash, no campfire. She wasn't there to camp. She was there to work. According to Utah's Geological Department, her permit listed the route as individual, daytime only, with field log and data relay over radio link. Meaning every evening she was to call in on a civilian channel and report her coordinates. Amy carried a Midland handheld radio with an external battery pack and manually programmed codes. She wasn't using satellite. In 1998, that was still too expensive, too unreliable. Colleagues said her last 2 outings were solo and that she wasn't the kind to take risks. She was reserved, punctual, meticulous. One professor later said, "Amy was extremely methodical. If she stepped off her planned route, it wasn't an accident. It meant she was going somewhere no one else had been. Reports also say she was calm that March. No conflicts, no signs of stress. But in one letter to a friend in Tucson, she wrote something strange. Sometimes I think someone's already walked these same lines and left no mark. That single sentence was eerily close to a note found in a sealed 1994 missing person case from San Miguel County, New Mexico, where a firefighter vanished, leaving only a scrap of paper that read, "Didn't want to be found." That case also showed no signs of a return trail. No one paid attention to her words at the time. Maybe it was a metaphor. Maybe fatigue from dry numbers. But those very words would later be copied into the criminal case file, because 5 days later she would stop making contact, and all that would be left of her was a backpack. Standing upright on a rock no one had climbed, and a single word scratched near the edge. Again. Chapter 2. Scientific Point of Reference. Amy Wilson kept a field journal on paper. This was protocol. No digital records in an open zone where electrical interference could affect measuring equipment. She used a sturdy B5 format notebook, hand-bound, with a gray cover and the University of Utah logo. On each page, date, coordinates, layer description, humidity, temperature, orientation of strata, color of the rock. All readings were recorded in pencil so that sunlight glare wouldn't interfere when copying data onto tracing paper. Experts who later analyzed the diary noted the unusual resilience of the pencil graphite on the paper, as if it had been applied under pressure far greater than normal handwriting, and on some pages they found microscopic particles of minerals not native to that region. Structurally, her records were impeccable, dry, precise, without personal digressions, up until the third day of the route. The first anomaly appears in the March 25 entry. Coordinates: the northeastern ledge of the Cave Fin Plateau. There, Amy recorded shifts in sedimentary lines typical of the late Cretaceous period. The readings were standard, except for one detail. In the unforeseen column, she made her first personal note. Yesterday at approximately 1640, I heard someone descending behind the ridge. Couldn't locate the source. Air is dry, no echo. Possibly falling gravel. But the sense of being accompanied remains. One investigator would later say, "In the canyon, any falling pebble echoes for miles, and here, a sound with no echo? That was either something extremely quiet, or it just wasn't from here." The second such note appears in the March 26th entry. Deja vu feeling on section W9. Certain I've already passed this stretch, though I could not have. No trail present. Vegetation identical. Navigation errors. None detected. Analysis of data from her Garmin 38 navigator, later found in the backpack, confirmed that Amy Wilson had not previously passed through those coordinates during this expedition. She wasn't panicking. She still wrote as a scientist. But between the lines, the tension was there, the shift from methodology to observation, the first sign that something in the work was beginning to break. By the end of the day, she had changed the structure of her field notes. At the bottom of the page, there was an addition, written in unusually large handwriting. The wind is picking up, but it's not changing direction. It feels like someone is slowly repeating my route. But yesterday's. A one-day delay. I know this, but I can't prove it. Witnesses who later studied her handwriting noted that in this paragraph, Amy used words and constructions uncharacteristic for her. For example, the phrase, "I know this, but I can't prove it," was direct and emotional. In her correspondence and previous journals, such a manner of speech had not been observed. Usually, she separated observation from hypothesis. Here, she didn't. Here it was already a personal assertion. The radio report for that day still came through. 8:20 p.m. Frequency 462.675 MHz. The message was short. Position 37.529N, 111.271W. All readings normal. Continuing tomorrow along the southern line. W10 and W11. Contact as scheduled. Wilson. But the staff at the university's receiving station who listened to the recording later noted that Amy's voice sounded unusual, as if restrained, yet uncertain. And at the very end of the transmission, her voice simply cut off, as if she hadn't been allowed to finish, or someone nearby had switched off the radio. One of the operators on duty that night swore he heard some strange, very faint click at the end of the broadcast. Not like a radio click, more as if the signal had been abruptly cut, but not on the radio itself, somewhere close by. The recording didn't survive. The reception was live, and that night, the automatic tape recorder malfunctioned. Only a handwritten transcript by the duty operator remained. He, incidentally, later resigned. The investigation into the recorder malfunction yielded nothing. Technical experts found no cause for the breakdown or signs of interference. The last contact with Amy was logged on March 27th at 4:30 p.m. She came on the air as agreed, but transmitted only one sentence. Beginning anchor to Rock D4, checking the plateau, heading to point. And that was it. The transmission stopped, not cut, just stopped, as if the connection was switched off mid-sentence. No static, no dropout, just silence. Later, people would say that at this moment she was already in the zone where everything would begin, a zone no one else ever entered, because the ascent was technically possible only by rope, and only from one side. But no rope would be found, no traces of ascent either. GPS data from the Garmin 38 Navigator found in her backpack confirmed that Amy Wilson's last recorded position was at the base of Plateau D4. However, the device was switched off, and the time of the last log entry did not match the time of her final radio transmission. The difference was 17 minutes and 38 seconds. Only the journal would remain at the site, open, on a page where she had started writing but hadn't finished. The last sentence: "If I'm wrong, then no one was following me. But then, where did the footsteps yesterday come from? And why is the stone cracking, the one I already—" The entry ends abruptly. On the next page, nothing. But when the sheet, seemingly blank, was held up to the light, faint, wave-like indentations became visible, as if something dull had been dragged across it. The marks formed no words, no symbols. Chapter 3. The Yellow Mark on the Rock. On the evening of March 28th, no report came through from Amy Wilson to the University of Utah's receiving station, located in the geomonitoring building on Ramona Drive in Salt Lake City. The night shift operator, a graduate student named Lori Cram, first assumed it was just a signal dropout. In that area, transmissions were often disrupted by terrain and weather. But after 2 hours, she entered into the log. No signal from object PT-0409, repeated attempts, no response, and relayed the note to the project's supervisor, Professor Thomas Nair. That same evening, Amy's mother, Carol Wilson, called the university. She hadn't been able to reach her daughter for 2 days. Normally, Amy wrote letters, paper letters as always, and mailed them from local post offices. But since the 26th, nothing had arrived. Carol's voice was short, tense. This just isn't like her. She never missed a check-in, not even over the radio. Later, Carol would recall a vivid dream she had that night, between March 28th and 29th. She saw Amy standing on a high cliff in a dry, relentless wind, hearing only one word, repeated over and over, but she couldn't make it out. She woke with a deep chill, though the room was warm. On March 29th, Professor Nair decided to contact the Garfield County Land Management Office. Technically, there was no official missing person status yet. It had been less than 48 hours since the last contact, but his influence got the search moving faster. A 4-person team set out for Escalante early the next morning. They found Amy's car quickly. A Subaru Leone sat on a sandy rise just off the dusty main track, its sides braced with rocks against the wind. Windows up, doors locked, no sign of forced entry. On the dashboard lay a map with markings for W9 and W10, and a thick line leading toward a rock formation labeled D4. In the glove compartment, 3 rolls of film for her camera, 2 exposed, 1 empty. On the back seat, a change of clothes, an army knife, a notebook filled with formulas. Later, during a closer inspection of the interior, searchers found a single crisp fingerprint on the dusty dashboard, right beside the map. Analysis confirmed it didn't belong to Amy or to anyone on the search team. The identity was never determined. Several members of the team, as they neared Plateau D4, reported temporary malfunctions with their compasses, the needle jittering wildly or swinging due south before snapping back to normal. The effect stopped the moment they stepped just a few dozen yards back from the base of the rock. The main thing missing from the trunk was 1 rope, a helmet, a diary, and a recording device. This meant she had set out on the route fully equipped. The plan, to reach D4 and return. On the second day of the sweep, April 1st, the group reached the D4 rock. The feature was an elongated sandstone platform jutting 9 feet above the plateau with an almost vertical western face. From the north, a natural ledge led up to it, narrow, fragile, with drops on either side. The ascent was possible but dangerous. It required a steady foothold and a confident step. According to the searchers, Amy could have climbed it, but not without gear. At the top of the rock stood her backpack. Upright, with its back facing east, straps tucked inward, as if deliberately set down during a rest. No dust, no sand on the flap, as though it had been placed there recently. All around, nothing. No scratches, no torn fabric, no boot prints. The ground was hard and rocky. The trackers moved with compasses and magnifying glasses. Not a single patch of disturbed moss, not 1 footprint, nothing except the backpack itself. The tracking experts were particularly puzzled by the complete absence of microdust or grains of sand on the backpack. With constant wind on the exposed rock, this would be physically impossible for an object that had stood there for even a few hours. Inside, an almost complete kit, measuring instrument, map, a half-empty bottle of water, a pack of food, gloves, diary. The diary was open, the last entry unfinished. The ink was slightly smudged, as if from condensation or sweat. But the paper was not soaked. No rain, no dew. This is important. It meant the backpack had been left recently, and the weather in the area had been dry, without precipitation, for 5 weeks straight. On the stone, right at the edge of the cliff, the word again had been scratched with a knife or other sharp object, unevenly, diagonally. Letters slanted to the right. The handwriting was recognizable, cursive, with a characteristic shift in the upper hook of the letter G. Later, when compared to the diary entries, it would be confirmed, a 75% match with Amy's handwriting. But not conclusively. As the forensic expert put it, there's similarity to Amy's handwriting, but the tool used to make the inscription is different. It may not have been written by her own hand, or it was held at a different angle. We cannot rule out that someone was attempting to distort the handwriting. The expert also noted that the pressure used to carve the first 2 letters was significantly greater than in the last ones, as if the author had been applying unnatural effort or had suddenly run out of strength. No tracks led down from the rock. That was documented. From the word again to the edge, nothing. No dirt, no sand, no blood, no scatter of gravel. Just bare, smooth stone. Below, 100-foot drop. Jagged outcrops, sandstone traps. Sarah Leffingwell, one of the rescuers, put it simply. If she was standing here and jumped, Then where's the body? Where's the blood? Where are the shoes? Another rescuer, a former combat medic, added, "Down there, beneath the cliff, there was no sign of a fall at all. No fractures in the rock, no debris you'd expect when something hits from that height. It's like nothing ever fell." And no one had an answer, because there was nothing down there. Chapter 4. The Flat Top. The D4 plateau wasn't particularly tall, only about 100 feet from the canyon floor, but the terrain made it nearly inaccessible. Sheer drops on 3 sides, and on the 4th, a brittle, crumbling ascent even a seasoned climber would treat with caution. Old geological maps marked it as isolated sandstone with unstable edge. No official trail led there. Even on Amy's paper map, the route to D4 was shown as a dotted line, clearly not meant for travel without protection. Geologists who examined the sandstone after the incident noted unusually low quartz content and a high proportion of unstable clay minerals, making the rock extremely fragile and prone to breaking under pressure, meaning any ascent would have left obvious damage. And yet, the pack stood there, upright, no hint of a fall, no scuffs on the fabric, no torn straps. Even the dust that the wind scoured off the platform hadn't settled on it. Rescuers noted the top flap was open, yet no sand inside. That meant the pack had been placed there either just before it was found or in conditions far calmer than those recorded that day. Meteorological data for April 1, 1998 confirmed gusts up to 16 mph. On open rock, with no shelter, dust would have entered any open compartment. Experts from the Weather Service confirmed. The winds that day were more than enough to blow light debris and deposit dust into any open object. The pack's condition does not match our weather data. Rescuers removed it intact, contents undisturbed. Only back at camp did they inventory it. Everything inside was dry. First aid kit untouched, field notebook undamaged, food unopened. Garmin 38 GPS, off but with a full charge. It hadn't been used in the last 48 hours. The last saved location, directly beneath the D4 cliff, within a 20-foot margin of the pack's position, meaning she, or someone, activated it just before the climb to mark coordinates. Fingerprints, smudged. No dust in the ports. Amy's diary was in a separate cover. Heavy paper, clear pen pressure. The last entry was unfinished, cutting off mid-word. Crackle, presumably describing the sound of rock beneath her feet. But then, nothing. No letter, no period, not even a stray mark, as if the hand had been stopped without dropping the pencil. When held to the light, faint, shallow indentations could be seen on the last pages after the cutoff. They were irregular, wave-like, without alignment to the lines of text. Analysis showed they weren't made by pencil or pen, but by something hard and blunt, possibly a fingernail or the reverse side of an object, pressed lightly, almost absent-mindedly. The pencil lay beside the diary, perfectly parallel to the left side of the backpack. Straight. The lead wasn't broken. The barrel was intact, which meant it hadn't been dropped. It hadn't fallen out. Someone placed it there, deliberately. Amy was right-handed. For the pencil to end up in that exact position, it would have to be set down with the left hand, standing off to the side, or placed there after she was gone. And that wasn't the only thing that didn't add up. At the very top of the rock face, there were no traces, no shoe prints, no scuffs, no flattened moss, not even the faint scratches sandstone gets when small rocks are kicked loose by boots. Someone had been there, but only after the backpack arrived. Before that, nothing. Silence. The forensic sweep found no fibers, no bits of rubber or leather, no organic residue. Nothing you'd expect from clothes or footwear brushing against the surface. The wind up there was steady, not a storm, but constant. If she'd stood there for more than 5 minutes, her hair, her clothing, even her sleeves would have disturbed the dust and grit, leaving ripples in the fine sediment. But there was nothing. Lewis Crawford, a footprint analyst, summed it up. It looked like someone set that pack down while wearing gloves, without touching the ground, or lowered it from a helicopter. It just doesn't fit with anything we know about how objects leave traces. He added, to set a 40-pound pack upright on rock like that, you need time to adjust it. With that kind of wind, you'd definitely see disturbed dust around it. And there wasn't any. But a helicopter would have left rotor wash patterns, and there was no sign of that. Not on radar, not acoustically. That's when the first unofficial theory emerged. Amy never climbed up there. The pack was placed without her, or after her. But by who? Rescue teams checked every possible route. From the south, sheer vertical. From the west, a loose crumbling drop. From the north, a razor-thin edge only possible with full climbing protection. But there were no ropes, and more importantly, no anchor point. The rock was smooth, no cracks, no ledges, meaning no ordinary person could have just gone up there and come back without leaving a trace. But the backpack stood there, not thrown, not dropped, set down like it was on display, and there was something almost deliberate about it, as if someone wanted this to be the only thing found. Chapter 5. The Scratched Word. On the southern edge of the rock, about 30 inches from where the backpack stood, a single word was carved into the smooth sandstone. Again, the letters were uneven with sharp breaks. Whoever made them used a hard, pointed tool, likely a geologist's knife or a metal probe tip. The cuts were about 1.5 millimeters deep. The angle changed as it went. The first 2 letters pressed in hard, the last ones lighter, as if the writer had tired or was lying down while carving. One letter, the G, dropped unusually low. That single trait would later become key in the handwriting analysis. 2 microtrace experts worked the scene. They made impressions, took measurements, photographed the scratches from multiple angles. Their first conclusion, it wasn't done quickly, not in panic, not in desperation. The cuts were deliberate, controlled, without tremor. That alone clashed with the idea of a frantic moment. Unofficially, one of them noted something stranger. The dust around the inscription looked too clean. It didn't match the rest of the dust on the rock, as if it had been brought from somewhere else. Why would someone carve the word again at the top of a cliff, next to a backpack, when there's nowhere else to go? You couldn't see the word from the trail. Even from 3 feet away, it was invisible unless you stood at the right angle. It felt like it was meant only for someone standing on that exact spot looking down, or for someone deliberately searching. It wasn't a random mark, it was a message. The handwriting analysis was done at the University of Utah. They compared it to her diary, her field notes, her student forms. The biggest matches, the way she shaped the G, the tilt of the A, and the incomplete closed loop on the E. The similarity was about 75%, enough to say, probably her. But the tool wasn't hers. The geologist's knife found in her pack wouldn't have made such clean edges. The bevel was wrong, which meant either she had a second tool or someone else carved it, trying to imitate her handwriting. As one forensic examiner put it, there's a resemblance to Amy's hand, but the tool's different. Could have been written by someone else, or maybe the grip angle was off. We can't rule out an intentional alteration to mimic her style. Tracker Luis Mendoza spent half a day on site. He circled the rock, checked the sheer faces, even rappelled down the west side using a rope brought in from base. Not a single sign anyone had stood, sat, or grabbed the edge. The stone was clean, untouched for weeks, except for 2 spots, where the pack stood and where the word was carved. Inside Amy's pack was a pencil, but nothing capable of cutting stone like that. That, too, was documented. Later they checked. There was no mention of the word again anywhere in her diary. Not in notes, not in drafts, not in any past expeditions. Even in the letters her mother later provided, the word again never appeared. This was the first and only time, the only mark left after her. No date, no explanation, just a word like a repetition, like something had already happened before. The idea that it marked a return trip didn't hold up. University archives showed Amy had never been in that area before March of 1998. She had no access to past observation data, no connection to Site D4. Professor Nur later confirmed, "We checked all old maps, reports, expedition logs from that sector. Plateau D4 was never a focus point. No one from our staff or students had ever officially climbed there or done detailed work there before Amy." That left two possibilities. Either she somehow knew she'd been there before, but couldn't remember how, or someone else had been there first, and she was only retracing their steps, silently. But if that's true, why does it all end right here? Chapter 6. The Zone of Impossibility. On the map, Plateau D4 looked harmless. A flat sandstone formation with a slight slope, a rocky ledge about 30.2 meters high. But in person, especially from the side search teams would have approached, it looked like something else entirely. One rescuer would later call it the Zone of Impossibility. It was a place that looked reachable, but wasn't. The only logical route to the top was a narrow northwestern ridge, no more than 1.5 feet wide. You could only cross it roped up, with someone belaying. Even experienced rescuers struggled on their first ascent. The wind pushed hard, the sand slid underfoot, handholds crumbled. Everyone agreed, without a rope or a ladder, no one alone could make it up. Amy was alone. There wasn't a single note in Amy's diary about carrying rope. Her car was searched. No climbing gear. Just a standard tie-down strap for securing a pack in the trunk. Nowhere near enough to safely climb D4's edge. The entire perimeter was checked. Not a single boot print. No knee marks. No dislodged stones. Nothing to suggest a person, especially one carrying a pack, had ever moved across that fragile sandstone. Physically impossible. Sandstone of type K2 will chip under any load, especially at the edges. But there were no chips, no cracks, no damage at all. Not on the approach, not where the pack stood. The rock was clean, intact. The geological report was blunt. This rock is extremely brittle. The absence of chips or breaks after someone supposedly carried 150 to 170 pounds up there is simply incompatible with physical law. The only break in the surface was the carved word again. Everything else was untouched. Calculations showed that to bring a pack up there and set it down without leaving marks, you'd need either a helicopter with surgical precision or a rope system anchored externally. Neither was found. No pitons, no anchor rings, no rope fragments. Another theory was checked. Maybe someone had jumped from a neighboring ledge, but the closest point was only 3 meters higher, separated by a deep gap. The jump was impossible. No one could make it, and if they tried, they'd break both legs on landing. Rescuers wondered, maybe someone had already been on the summit, and the pack was simply found there. But that fell apart too. No research team had ever climbed it. D4 was considered unimportant. Even on maps it was listed as secondary. Unstable rock, not worth the effort. That left the simplest and least believable option, that Amy climbed it herself. No rope, no marks, no witnesses, no trace. But if she did, why didn't she come down? Descent via the ridge would have left marks. Yet no tracker, no dog found even the smallest fragment or scratch where she might have slipped. The air, which should have held scent, was still. Shade temperature, 64 degrees. Perfect conditions for scent retention. But there was nothing. No odor trail, no direction, up or down. Jenny Coleman, a K9 handler with 9 years of search experience, described it like this. "We started the dog from her car. He followed the trail strong, steady. We got almost to the top. And then he just stopped. Sat down, refused to go forward. He wasn't scared. He wasn't distracted. It was like the person he was tracking just wasn't there anymore. Not hiding, not running. Gone. She added, "I've seen trails vanish in water. I've seen wind scatter scent. But to have it just stop, in midair, on open rock? Never. It was like it had been erased." It's in the official report, loss of dynamic trail at the final point. In unofficial terms, a void, an empty place, a place where someone should have been but wasn't, and no living thing believed they'd ever been there at all. That's how the spot where a person could only vanish became a place no one wanted to climb again. Not even rescuers, not even with ropes, not even for evidence. One rescuer later admitted, "You know, it was this strange feeling, like the rock wasn't empty. Not that I saw anyone, but it felt like someone was there, like we weren't supposed to be." Chapter 7. The Scent That Wasn't There. On the 8th day after Amy vanished, April 4th, federal K-9 units from Denver were brought in. This wasn't a volunteer group, it was a professional team with mountain search experience, the kind called in to locate bodies in Colorado and Nevada's national parks. Their job was to run dogs over the entire route, including D4, but from the opposite side of all previous approaches. They were told nothing about the backpack, the diary, or the carved word. That was deliberate, to avoid bias. The dogs worked as a pair, a Labrador named Tang and a Belgian Malinois named Frenchie. Both had over 30 operations behind them, including cadaver scent cases. Their starting point was Amy's car, where her scent was taken from the seat fabric and the backpack in the trunk. From the car, there was a trail. It wound through brush toward the southern edge, roughly halfway to the rock formation. The dogs moved with precision, no hesitation. Handler Dave Silverman described it as, like they were walking a tight string, heading for one specific spot. That spot was at the base of D4, the exact place where earlier trackers had stopped, where no dog had gone farther before. They both stopped at the same moment. They didn't growl. They didn't pull at the leashes. They just froze. Frenchie circled once, then again, as if trying to reacquire the scent. On the second loop, she sat and looked up. Tang lay down. That was it. No sign of living or dead scent beyond that point. This wasn't fatigue, and it wasn't distraction, Silverman said in his report. They froze, like the scent just evaporated right there. Scent trails don't work like that. He tried a secondary command, moving closer to the base of the rock. He used a piece of Amy's clothing, let the wind carry it. Neither dog moved. "This isn't refusal," he wrote. "It's denial. It happens when an animal gets a signal but can't confirm it, like something's cutting it off, as if the scent channel just stopped midair. No up, no down, just a point, and nothing beyond it." He requested a second set of soil samples from the spot. Lab results showed no organic traces, no sweat, no blood, no saliva. The ground was sterile. That happens in only two scenarios. Either everything has been washed away, or no one was there at all. But at the time of her disappearance, and for more than 5 weeks before, there had been no rainfall. This contradicted earlier readings. Amy's step counter, left in her backpack, recorded her last movement in a location almost identical to this one, and the diary was found here too. Everything suggested she had been there, but the scent wasn't. It wasn't that it had faded. It simply wasn't recorded at all. Not on the stone, not on the moss, not in the deeper sandstone layer where sweat particles and skin oils settle, not on the diary, not even on the backpack straps. Later, FBI scent specialists confirmed there are signs of skin and clothing contact, but the volatile compounds that create a unique human scent are almost absent. It's as if the pack had been treated or kept in an environment that prevents scent from clinging. That's extremely unusual for a backpack worn for several days. Inside the command tent, a new theory started making the rounds. Item transport. But that raised its own questions. By who? And why? So carefully, silently, without a trace. There were no broken branches, no char from a fire, not even a cigarette butt. When the team was asked to check the base of the rock from the opposite side, the side where someone might have fallen, the result was identical. Not a single reaction from the dogs. Even on the lower tier, where you'd logically expect traces, organic residue, animal hair, micro debris, there was nothing. Dave Silverman put it bluntly. We can't confirm a person was here. We can only confirm the presence of objects. But a human scent isn't there. That's rare. I've seen it twice before. Both times it was in situations where normal logic no longer applied. When the investigator asked what kind of situations, Silverman, according to his colleagues, replied, places where what you're looking for doesn't belong to this world anymore. That line never made it into the official report. In the final summary, it was recorded as discrepancy between the confirmed physical presence of items and the absence of scent traced from the carrier at the last verified point of contact. In bureaucratic terms, a paradox. In practice, a dead end. There had been a trail, and then nothing. As if the person had been there, but left no sign of life. No molecular trace, no sound, no visual presence, just a silent backpack on the summit. Chapter 8. The Mirror Route Theory. When the official hypotheses run dry, the trackers start talking. Not in reports, not over the radio. In the tent, late at night, after 16 miles of searching with nothing to show for it. These talks are more observation than theory. That's how the idea first surfaced, later nicknamed the Mirror Route. It came from Luis Mendoza, the same tracker who'd examined the ridge on D4. He said, if she walked it, then someone walked it before her, and left a trail. Not a physical one, but a direction, a rhythm, a thought. The idea was simple. Amy's behavior, as recorded in her diary, matched a route someone else had taken before her. Not literally, but in feeling. She hadn't seen anyone, she hadn't heard voices, but her entries included phrases like, I'm sure I was here yesterday, sense of repetition, a trail that's not on any map, but feels familiar. In field science, this is rare. A route is either remembered or it's created from scratch. This was something else, a borrowed memory, as if she'd been walking in the footsteps of someone who had never been there. A psychologist brought in later tried to explain it as a phenomenon of solo suggestion, when someone in isolation begins to perceive recurring natural features as a pattern. But even he admitted Amy didn't fit the profile. She showed no paranoia, no hysteria, no signs of disorientation. Her diary was consistent, precise, methodical. The only irregularities came in the final third. This isn't the writing of someone in delirium or psychosis, the psychologist said. These are the notes of a scientist documenting something anomalous. She doubted her own perceptions, but didn't dismiss them. That's a clear mind encountering the unexplainable. By then, people who had worked other disappearances in Escalante began arriving at camp. Some remembered cases where routes went missing, not people. Meaning the person was found, but their entire path, waypoints, bearings, marks, matched no known trail, not on any map, not on the ground. In 2 out of 6 such cases, the coordinates in those missing route reports matched entries from Amy's diary. For example, in one 1985 case, a rescued hiker swore he'd been walking a trail that wasn't on any map, and his GPS track appeared to run straight through solid rock. This reinforced the mirror route theory that Amy wasn't following her own trail, that she was, perhaps unconsciously, retracing someone else's route, one that had never been documented, possibly not recent at all, possibly old, or abandoned, or intentionally hidden. An old ranger recalled local legends of spirit trails, paths said to pass through rock, visible only to certain people or only at certain times. In her notes, Amy made one crucial observation. I feel like this rock layer isn't just sediment. It's a line someone has already walked. It sounds stupid, but I follow it, and it feels like it's leading me, like the stone itself knows something. That's not the language of science anymore. That's a human reacting to a presence, one she couldn't see or hear. Some team members floated the idea, maybe she was following someone. But then, where was the second person's trace? No steps, no camp, no fire ring, no prints. Or maybe it was the opposite. Maybe someone was leading her, unseen, without physical contact, through nothing but coincidences, through internal signals that no instrument could detect. Tracker Mendoza suggested, if this was a mirror route, she wasn't just repeating a path, she was repeating a state, or someone's intent, maybe even the intent to disappear without a trace. Tracker Coleman put it more bluntly. She was following someone who knew this trail, but didn't want to be found, and in the end, she did exactly what they did. She disappeared, not in the literal sense, but like she stepped out of ordinary reality, out of every explanation we have. That version, of course, never made it into the final report. There, it was neat and clinical. Presumed disorientation in remote terrain followed by fatal outcome. Personal effects recovered. No body. Cause for inability to establish route, undetermined. But those who had been on D4 didn't believe a word of it, because a person can disappear. But not their movement, not their trail, not their warmth, not their scent. And with Amy Wilson, everything was gone. All that remained was a backpack and a single word carved into stone. Some members of the search team later admitted they felt Amy Wilson's case wasn't closed so much as paused, as if D4 itself was holding on to something, just not ready to let it out. Chapter 9. The Last Entry. When Amy's backpack was delivered to Salt Lake City, the examination was conducted in the presence of the county investigator and representatives from the Department of Geosciences. Every item was documented, photographed, measured. But the main focus was the diary. The cover, thick, fabric-bound, slightly worn. The page edges, clean. The handwriting, neat, perfectly vertical. Inside, 44 pages of entries. The last two were different. The second to last page begins with coordinates 37.52941 Sewardegmarihen, 111.20796 degree. That point is at the base of plateau D4, roughly 30 yards from where the backpack was found, meaning she was standing there when she wrote it. The entry was made at around 2:30 p.m. based on her own note about the sun's position. Shadow falling west, so a little after 2. Wind steady, no dust. Everything too calm. After that came a set of phrases unlike anything else in her scientific log. Feeling a route I didn't plan. Line is too straight, not natural, but feels like it is. Stone is leading, not like a magnet, more like memory. If I haven't walked here before, why does it all feel already done? And then, the final line. Footsteps behind me, or ahead of me. I don't remember turning around. After that, a blank line. Then, the fragment. If I'm wrong, then no one was behind me. But then, where did the footsteps yesterday come from? And why is the rock cracking that I already... The sentence never ends. The entry just stops. Later, the investigator noted, usually, when an entry cuts off, there's some accidental mark, a line, a blot, the sign of a pencil dropping. But here, it's as if someone simply lifted her hand while she was writing. No struggle, no resistance. The last page is completely blank, but when held to the light, faint indentations are visible, as though a fingernail or the back of a pencil had been dragged across it. The groove is wave-like, meaningless, almost nervous. Analysis confirmed the page had not been turned by Amy. The wear pattern on the cover showed the diary had been closed by someone else. And that detail didn't fit. Amy always closed her journals from the left, leaving a distinctive crease. Here, there was no crease. The fingerprint expert found no clear prints from Amy or the search team on the last pages or the cover. Only unidentified smudge traces. That's where the evidence ends. The Garfield County Sheriff's Office officially closed the case after 7 months, citing the absence of a body, lack of new evidence, and high probability of disorientation in a remote area with subsequent fatal outcome. The protocol read, "Presumed deceased within remote zone, location of remains unknown, cause of disappearance undetermined." Amy's mother, Carol, fought to have the case reopened for 2 years. She wrote 24 letters. In one, addressed to the university administration, she said, "If she died, something would be left. A trail, ashes, maybe some personal item. Sent. But I have nothing, not even grief, just the feeling that someone left her backpack there on purpose, to make us give up, to make us believe it was over." The letter was never answered. Since then, no one has climbed D4. Unofficially, it's considered a no-go point. The student field maps from the 2000s left the formation off their recommended routes, and the locals still speak of the second arches as a place where time seems to behave strangely, and where sometimes you hear footsteps that lead nowhere.